Louis Bryant's life changes forever the moment Princess Aria's gilded shuttle touches down on Centauri Prime. The poor human soldier stands at attention, his threadbare uniform a stark contrast to the opulent Tsenkethi vessel. As the hatch opens, Louis steels himself for another day of thankless security detail, unaware that he's about to become entangled in a web of interstellar politics and forbidden attraction. The spaceport bustles with activity, a melting pot of species from across the galaxy. Humans and aliens alike pause to gawk at the Tsenkethi royal procession. Louis observes the crowd, noting the mixture of awe and resentment on their faces. The Tsenkethi, with their advanced technology and arrogant demeanor, have long been a thorn in humanity's side. Princess Aria emerges from her shuttle, her iridescent scales shimmering under the station's harsh lights. Her entourage follows, each member adorned in intricate robes that put even the wealthiest human's attire to shame. Louis feels a pang of self-consciousness as he takes his place in the security detail, acutely aware of the gulf between his station and that of the alien royalty. The welcoming ceremony begins, a carefully choreographed dance of diplomacy. Human officials force smiles and utter platitudes, while the Tsenkethi barely conceal their disdain. Louis scans the crowd, his training kicking in as he searches for potential threats. The tension in the air is palpable, a powder keg waiting for a spark. That spark comes in the form of a rebel Tsenkethi, his scales dulled and his eyes wild with fanaticism. He bursts from the crowd, a plasma pistol raised and aimed at the princess. Time slows for Louis as his combat training takes over. He lunges forward, tackling the would-be assassin just as the weapon discharges. The crowd erupts in panic, but Louis stays focused, disarming the attacker with a series of swift, precise movements. As the dust settles, Louis finds himself face-to-face with Princess Aria. Her expression is a mixture of shock, relief, and curiosity. For a moment, their eyes lock, and Louis sees something unexpected in the alien princess's gaze, a flicker of vulnerability beneath her haughty exterior. The aftermath of the attack is chaos. Security teams swarm the area, and accusations fly between human and Tsenkethi officials. Louis stands apart, still processing what just happened. He's startled when Princess Aria approaches, her entourage trailing behind nervously. "You," she says, her voice a mix of command and wonder. "You will be my personal bodyguard during my stay." Louis blinks in surprise, aware of the shocked murmurs from both humans and Tsenkethi. "Your Highness, I'm just a low-ranking security officer. Surely there are more qualified—" "Silence," Aria cuts him off. "I've made my decision. You've proven your worth, human. I won't feel safe with anyone else." Louis glances at his superiors, who nod reluctantly. The Tsenkethi Emperor, a towering figure radiating power and disdain, steps forward. "Daughter, this is highly irregular. A human bodyguard?" "Father," Aria replies, her tone leaving no room for argument. "It's this human, or I return home immediately. Your choice." The Emperor's scales ripple with barely contained anger, but he nods curtly. "Very well. To avoid a diplomatic incident, we'll allow it." As the tensions subside and the procession continues, Louis falls into step beside Princess Aria. His mind races with the implications of his new assignment. The pay will be substantial, a lifeline for his struggling family back on Earth. But the cost? He can already feel the resentful stares of his fellow humans, marking him as a traitor for working so closely with the Tsenkethi. Princess Aria's voice cuts through his thoughts. "Keep up, human, and do try not to gawk. It's unbecoming of my personal guard." Louis straightens his posture, already regretting his decision. As they make their way through the station, he can't shake the feeling that he's stepped into something much bigger than a simple security detail. Unbeknownst to him, hidden cameras track their movement, monitored by shadowy figures with plans that could shake the foundations of human Tsenkethi relations. The adventure has only just begun, and Louis Bryant, the poor human soldier, finds himself at the center of a galactic storm, with a spoiled alien princess as his unlikely companion. As Louis fell into step beside Princess Aria, his mind raced with the implications of his new assignment. The weight of responsibility settled heavily on his shoulders, a stark contrast to the lightness of his near-empty wallet. He pushed aside thoughts of his struggling family back on Earth, focusing instead on the immediate task at hand. "Keep up, human," Princess Aria's voice cut through his reverie. "And do try not to gawk. It's unbecoming of my personal guard." Louis straightened his posture, adjusting his stride to match the princess's brisk pace. As they made their way through the bustling station, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd stepped into something much bigger than a simple security detail. Days passed, and Louis found himself settling into an uneasy routine. He shadowed Princess Aria through endless diplomatic meetings, stood guard outside her quarters, and escorted her to various functions across the station. All the while, he felt the weight of hidden eyes upon them, an unseen presence that set his nerves on edge. It was during one particularly dull meeting that Louis first noticed something amiss. A human diplomat kept glancing nervously at his datapad, his fingers tapping in irregular rhythm against the table. When the meeting adjourned, Louis observed the man slip away, speaking in hushed tones into a communicator. Curiosity piqued, Louis began to pay closer attention to the comings and goings around the station. He noticed patterns in the movements of certain individuals, both human and Senkethi, whispered conversations that ceased abruptly when he approached. Furtive glances exchanged across crowded rooms. As the pieces began to fall into place, Louis realized he was uncovering something far more sinister than simple political maneuvering. A conspiracy was brewing, one that threatened to unravel the fragile peace between humans and Senkethi. Torn between his duty to report his findings and his growing loyalty to Princess Aria, Louis agonized over his next move. Finally, after a sleepless night spent weighing his options, he decided to confide in the princess. "Your Highness," Louis began, his voice low as they walked through a quiet corridor, "I need to speak with you privately. It's a matter of utmost importance." Aria raised an eyebrow, her iridescent scales shimmering under the station's lights. "Very well, human. My quarters will suffice." Once inside the opulent room, Louis took a deep breath and began to explain his suspicions. He detailed the patterns he'd observed, the whispered conversations, the clandestine meetings. As he spoke, he watched Aria's expression shift from skepticism to intrigue. "These are serious allegations, Louis," she said, using his name for the first time. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet, Your Highness," Louis admitted, "but I believe we can uncover it together." Aria studied him for a long moment, her alien eyes unreadable. Then, to Louis's surprise, she nodded. "Very well. We shall investigate this matter discreetly." Over the next few days, Louis and Aria worked in tandem, their eyes and ears attuned to the undercurrents of station life. They pieced together fragments of overheard conversations, tracked the movements of suspicious individuals, and slowly built a clearer picture of the conspiracy. Their shared mission brought them closer, the barriers of rank and species beginning to crumble. Louis found himself captivated by Aria's quick wit and unexpected moments of vulnerability. For her part, Aria seemed to soften in his presence, her haughty demeanor giving way to genuine curiosity about his life and experiences. Their investigation led them to the station's lower levels, a warren of maintenance tunnels and forgotten cargo bays. Disguised in nondescript clothing, they moved through the shadows, following a lead on a secret meeting of the conspirators. As they crouched behind a stack of crates, Louis felt Aria's scales brush against his arm. The contact sent an unexpected shiver through him, a reminder of the growing attraction he'd been trying to ignore. "Look," Aria whispered, pointing to a group of figures emerging from a side passage. Louis recognized Marcus Vane, a charismatic human diplomat, and Zorn, a high-ranking Senkethi official. The unlikely pair conferred in hushed tones, their body language tense and furtive. "We move tomorrow," Vane's voice carried to their hiding spot. "The sabotage of the life support systems will throw the station into chaos. Each side will blame the other, and the peace talks will crumble." Louis and Aria exchanged alarmed glances. The scope of the conspiracy was far greater than they'd imagined. As they turned to leave, Louis's foot connected with a loose piece of metal. The clang echoed through the cargo bay, and suddenly all eyes were on their hiding spot. "Intruders!" Zorn's voice rang out. "After them!" Louis grabbed Aria's hand, and they sprinted through the maze of corridors. The sound of pursuit grew closer as they navigated the unfamiliar territory. "This way," Louis panted, pulling Arya into a narrow maintenance shaft. They squeezed inside, pressing close together in the confined space. Louis could feel Arya's rapid heartbeat, her scales cool against his skin. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Louis looked down at Arya, their faces inches apart. Her eyes, usually so alien, now held a warmth that made his breath catch. He found himself leaning in, drawn by an irresistible force. Just as their lips were about to meet, the sound of running footsteps jolted them back to reality. The moment shattered, leaving behind a tangle of unwillpowered emotions and the pressing need to escape. They emerged from their hiding place, hearts racing from more than just the chase. As they made their way back to the upper levels, Louis and Arya shared a look of understanding. They had uncovered a plot that threatened the entire station, but they had also discovered something unexpected in each other. With time running out and the fate of Centauri Prime hanging in the balance, Louis and Arya faced a daunting challenge. They needed to stop the attack, but doing so would mean navigating a minefield of interspecies politics and personal feelings. As they stepped into the bustling main concourse, the weight of their secret knowledge pressed down upon them, a burden they now shared. Shared now bore even greater weight. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. They had uncovered a plot that threatened the entire station, but they had also discovered something unexpected in each other. With renewed perseverance, Louis and Arya set out to gather concrete evidence of the conspiracy. Louis's military training kicked in as he formulated a plan to infiltrate Marcus Vane's quarters. "We need to act fast," Louis said, his voice low as they walked through a deserted corridor. "I can get into Vane's quarters under the guise of a security inspection." Arya nodded, her scales shimmering under the station's lights. "And what of me? I cannot simply wait idly by." "You'll create a distraction," Louis replied. "Demand a tour of the human living areas. It'll keep attention away from me." The plan set in motion, Louis made his way to Vane's quarters, his heart pounding as he approached the door. He forced his features into a mask of professional indifference as he requested entry for a routine security check. Once inside, Louis moved swiftly, his eyes scanning the room for anything out of place. His breath caught as he noticed a slight irregularity in the wall paneling. Pressing gently, he felt a click, and a hidden compartment slid open. Inside, he found a collection of encrypted data chips and a strange device he didn't recognize. As he examined the object, realization dawned. This was a sophisticated hacking tool, capable of breaching the station's security protocols. Louis's hands shook slightly as he pocketed the evidence. The weight of his discovery pressed down on him as he carefully replaced the panel and prepared to leave. Meanwhile, Arya found herself face-to-face with Zorn, the Tzenkathai official involved in the conspiracy. Her scales prickled with tension as she forced a smile. "Princess Arya," Zorn said, his voice smooth. "What brings you to this part of the station?" Arya lifted her chin, channeling every ounce of royal haughtiness she possessed. "I wish to see how these humans live. One must know one's allies." Zorn's eyes narrowed slightly. "Indeed. And your human guard? Where is he?" "Attending to other duties," Arya replied coolly. "Surely you don't expect me to keep him by my side at all times?" The conversation continued, a delicate dance of words and hidden meanings. Arya felt sweat beating on her scales as she parried Zorn's subtle probes about her relationship with Louis. As Louis exited Vane's quarters, he nearly collided with a security patrol. Thinking quickly, he ducked into a maintenance shaft, pressing himself against the cool metal as the patrol passed by. Once the danger had passed, Louis made his way to the predetermined meeting point. He found Arya already there, her usual composure slightly ruffled. "What happened?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. Arya recounted her encounter with Zorn, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "He suspects something, Louis. We must be more careful." Together they examined the evidence Louis had gathered. The encrypted data chips remained a mystery, but the hacking device spoke volumes about the conspirators' intentions. "We need to take this to someone in authority," Louis said. "Someone we can trust." Arya nodded. "Your Captain Reyes. You spoke highly of her before." They approached Captain Elena Reyes cautiously, arranging a clandestine meeting in her private office. As they presented their evidence, Louis could see the disbelief in Reyes's eyes slowly give way to grim understanding. "This is serious," Reyes said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But we can't move against Vane or Zorn without more concrete proof." "What can we do?" Arya asked, frustration evident in her tone. Reyes leaned forward, her eyes intense. "I'll increase security around critical systems, but quietly. You two need to keep digging. Find out where and when they plan to strike." As they left Reyes's office, Louis felt the weight of responsibility settle even more heavily on his shoulders. He glanced at Arya, seeing his own tenacity mirrored in her alien features. "We need to get into the restricted areas," Arya said suddenly. "That's where they'll make their final preparations." Louis nodded slowly. "Your status as a princess could get us access, but it's risky." Before they could discuss further, a commotion near the docking bay caught their attention. Louis's breath caught as he saw a group of Tzenkethi officials escorting a tall, imposing figure. "Who is that?" he asked, noting the way Arya's posture had suddenly stiffened. Arya's voice was barely audible as she replied, "Prince Kyle, my betrothed." Louis felt a jolt of surprise, followed by a sinking feeling in his stomach. The arrival of Arya's fiancé added a new layer of complexity to their already precarious situation. As Prince Kale approached, his eyes locked onto Arya, then shifted to Louis with a look of thinly veiled suspicion. Louis straightened his posture, acutely aware of the growing tension. "Princess Arya?" Kale's voice was deep and resonant. "I've come to ensure your safety in light of recent events." Arya inclined her head slightly. "Your concern is noted, Prince Kyle. However, I assure you, my safety is well in hand." Louis could feel Kale's gaze boring into him, assessing and dismissive all at once. The unspoken challenge hung in the air between them. As the group moved towards the diplomatic quarters, Louis and Arya exchanged a quick glance. Their task had just become infinitely more complicated, and time was running out. Louis felt the tension in the air thicken as Prince Kale's eyes locked onto him, assessing and dismissive all at once. "And who might this be?" Kale's deep voice carried a hint of challenge as he gestured toward Louis. Arya stepped forward, her posture regal despite the palpable tension. "This is Louis, my assigned human bodyguard. He has been ensuring my safety during my stay on Centauri Prime." Kale's eyes narrowed, his scales shimmering with terrifying suspicion. "A human bodyguard? Surely our own security forces would suffice, Princess." Louis kept his face neutral, though his heart raced. He could feel the weight of the evidence in his pocket, a constant reminder of the danger they faced. "It was a gesture of goodwill from our hosts," Arya replied smoothly. "One I've found most satisfactory." The slight pause in Arya's words sent a shiver down Louis' spine. He fought to maintain his composure as Kale's gaze bore into him. "I see," Kale said, his tone indicating he saw far more than he let on. "Well, since I'm here now, perhaps we should review the security arrangements. I'm sure your human guard could use some assistance." Louis stepped forward, his training kicking in as he adopted a respectful but firm stance. "I appreciate your concern, Your Highness. I'd be happy to brief you on our current security protocols." Kale's mouth twisted into a smirk. "Indeed. Why don't we start with a tour of the station? I'm particularly interested in seeing some of the more restricted areas." Arya's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Louis felt a jolt of panic. They had planned to investigate those areas themselves. He opened his mouth to object, but Arya beat him to it. "An excellent idea, my prince," she said, her voice honeyed. "In fact, I was just about to suggest the same thing. Shall we?" As they set off, Louis fell into step beside Arya, maintaining a respectful distance. His mind raced, trying to figure out how they could salvage their plans with Kale's unexpected presence. The tour proceeded through the bustling main concourse, Kale's imposing figure drawing curious glances from humans and aliens alike. Louis kept his senses alert, looking for any sign of Vane or Zorn. As they approached the restricted areas, Arya deftly used her status to gain access, spinning a tale of diplomatic interest that even the most zealous security officer couldn't refuse. Inside, the corridors were eerily quiet, The hum of advanced machinery, the only sound. Louis's eyes darted from corner to corner, searching for anything out of place. Suddenly, movement near the main power core caught his attention. A figure in maintenance overalls ducked out of sight, but not before Louis recognized the distinctive gait of Marcus Vane. He leaned close to Arya, his lips barely moving. 3 o'clock. Vane. Arya nodded almost imperceptibly. Without missing a beat, she turned to Kyle and the accompanying officials. Tell me, what can you share about the station's energy systems? I find the intricacies of human technology fascinating. As Arya drew their attention with a series of increasingly complex questions, Louis seized his chance. He slipped away from the group, moving silently toward where he'd seen Vane disappear. The corridor led to a hidden access panel, cleverly disguised as part of the wall. Louis's fingers found the release mechanism, and the panel slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, he found himself in a secret room filled with blinking consoles and unfamiliar technology. His eyes widened as he recognized equipment similar to the hacking device from Vane's quarters. Louis moved quickly, snapping images with his comm device and downloading data from an unsecured terminal. His heart pounded in his ears, knowing every second increased the risk of discovery. Just as he finished, a noise behind him made him whirl around. Zorn stood in the doorway, his Tsenkethi features twisted in a snarl. I knew someone was sniffing around, Zorn growled, advancing on Louis. You should have stayed with your princess, human. Louis dropped into a fighting stance, his military training taking over. It's over, Zorn. We know about the plot. Zorn lunged, his powerful Tsenkethi physique giving him a clear advantage. Louis ducked under the first swing, using his smaller size and agility to stay just out of reach. The two grappled in the confined space, consoles sparking as they slammed into them. Louis managed to land a solid blow to Zorn's midsection, but the Tsenkethi's tough scales absorbed most of the impact. Zorn's clawed hand closed around Louis's throat, pinning him against the wall. Spots danced in Louis's vision as he struggled for air. In desperation, Louis brought his knee up hard, catching Zorn in a vulnerable spot beneath his scales. The Tsenkethi's grip loosened, and Louis took his chance. He drove his elbow into Zorn's face, feeling something crack under the impact. Zorn stumbled back, green blood seeping from his nose. Louis didn't wait for him to recover. He bolted for the exit, the sound of pursuit close behind him. Alarms began to blare as Louis emerged from the hidden room. He sprinted down the corridor, his lungs burning as he pushed himself to his limit. He rounded a corner and nearly collided with Arya and the tour group. Her eyes widened at his disheveled appearance. Louis, what? No time, he gasped, pressing the data chip into her hand. Arya smoothly concealed it within the folds of her robe. Before anyone could question further, the station rocked with a series of explosions. Emergency lights flashed as the main power fluctuated. Kyle's voice cut through the chaos. What is the meaning of this? Explain yourself, human. Louis straightened, meeting Kale's accusatory glare. I spotted a suspicious individual during our tour, Your Highness. I pursued them as part of my duty to protect Princess Arya. Kale's eyes narrowed, clearly unconvinced. But before he could press further, Captain Reyes's voice came over the comm system. Attention all personnel. We have a security breach in progress. Proceed to designated safe zones immediately. As they were hustled toward the nearest safe zone, Louis caught Arya's eye. A silent understanding passed between them. They had the evidence they needed, but their mission was just getting started. The station shuddered again, the lights flickering ominously. In the semi-darkness, Louis felt Arya's hand brush against his, a brief moment of connection amidst the growing chaos. They needed a secure location to examine the new evidence and plan their next move. As they entered a crowded turbo lift, Arya leaned close, her scales cool against Louis' skin. My quarters, she whispered. We'll be safe there. Louis nodded, acutely aware of Kale's watchful gaze upon them. As the turbo lift doors closed, he knew that the real challenge was only beginning. As the turbo lift doors slid shut, Louis felt the weight of their situation pressing down on him. The station's alarms continued to blare, punctuated by the occasional tremor from distant explosions. We need to move quickly, Arya whispered, her scales shimmering in the flickering emergency lights. My quarters aren't far. Lewis nodded, acutely aware of Prince Kale's piercing gaze. The Tzenkethi royals' presence complicated their already precarious situation. As the turbolift reached their destination, Lewis stepped out first, scanning the corridor for any immediate threats. "This way," Arya said, leading the group towards her quarters. Lewis fell into step beside her, his body tense and ready for action. As they approached Arya's quarters, Lewis noticed a maintenance access panel near the floor. An idea began to form in his mind. He caught Arya's eye and gave a subtle nod towards the panel. Her eyes widened in understanding. "Prince Kyle," Arya said, turning to address her betrothed, "perhaps you could check on the status of our ship. I fear these disturbances may necessitate a hasty departure." Kyle's eyes narrowed, his suspicion evident. "I think it best if we remain together, Princess. For your safety, of course." Louis stepped forward, adopting a respectful but firm tone. "Your Highness, I assure you that the Princess will be safe in her quarters. I will personally ensure her protection while you attend to these important matters." For a moment, it seemed Kyle might refuse, but another tremor shook the station, and he reluctantly nodded. "Very well. I shall return shortly, Princess." As Kyle departed, Arya quickly ushered Louis into her quarters. The moment the door closed behind them, Louis moved to the maintenance panel he had spotted earlier. "We don't have much time," he said, working to remove the panel. "If we're going to find that artifact, we need to move now." Arya nodded, her regal composure giving way to willpower. "The maintenance tunnels, they'll lead us to the unexplored areas of the station." With the panel removed, Louis peered into the dark tunnel beyond. "It's going to be tight. Are you sure about this?" In response, Arya gracefully slipped into the opening, her lithe form easily navigating the narrow space. Louis couldn't help but admire her adaptability as he followed her into the darkness. The maintenance tunnels were a maze of twisting corridors and branching pathways. Lewis's military training kicked in as he led them through the labyrinth, relying on his mental map of the station's layout. "Watch your step," he warned, as they entered a section of low gravity. Louis demonstrated how to move efficiently in the altered environment, and Arya quickly adapted, her natural grace evident even in these unusual circumstances. As they progressed deeper into the bowels of Centauri Prime, the environment became increasingly hostile. They encountered pockets of extreme heat, forcing them to remove outer layers of clothing. In other areas, the temperature dropped drastically, their breath visible in the frigid air. "Louis!" Arya called out, her voice tinged with excitement. "Look at this!" He turned to see her examining a section of wall that seemed slightly different from its surroundings. Upon closer inspection, Louis noticed faint lines etched into the metal, forming an intricate pattern. Arya's fingers traced the markings, her eyes wide with recognition. "These are Tzenkethi symbols, ancient ones. I've only seen them in historical texts." Louis ran his hand along the wall, feeling for any irregularities. His fingers caught on a small protrusion, and with a soft click, a hidden door swung open. They exchanged a look of triumph before cautiously entering the revealed chamber. The room beyond was vast, filled with unfamiliar technology that hummed with latent energy. At its center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a small, pulsating orb. "The artifact," Arya breathed, her scales shimmering in response to the orb's soft glow. Lewis scanned the room, his trained eye picking out several inactive security measures. "Hold on," he said, placing a hand on Arya's arm as she moved towards the pedestal. "Let me check for traps." Using his technical expertise, Lewis carefully disabled a series of defense mechanisms surrounding the artifact. With each deactivated system, he felt a mixture of pride and growing unease. The sophistication of the security measures spoke to the importance of what they had discovered. Finally, the path to the artifact was clear. Arya approached the pedestal, her hand outstretched. As her fingers made contact with the orb, it pulsed with increased intensity, casting a brilliant light throughout the chamber. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the station, echoing even in this hidden room. Captain Reyes's voice came over the intercom, announcing that Marcus Vane and Zorn had been spotted in restricted areas. "We need to move," Louis said urgently. "They're probably after the artifact, too." Arya nodded, carefully securing the orb in a pouch at her waist. As they made their way back to the maintenance tunnels, Lewis heard distant voices echoing through the corridors. "This way," he whispered, leading Arya down a different path. The new route was treacherous, requiring them to navigate narrow ledges and climb through partially blocked passages. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with a malfunctioning airlock. Warning lights flashed ominously as the mechanism struggled to maintain pressure. Louis's mind raced as he assessed the situation. "I can override the controls, but it'll take time. We need a distraction." Before Arya could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps reached them. A group of maintenance workers, alerted by the airlock malfunction, was headed their way. Arya straightened, her regal bearing returning in an instant. "I'll handle this. You focus on the airlock." As Lewis worked feverishly to bypass the airlock's safety protocols, he heard Arya's voice, smooth and authoritative, addressing the maintenance crew. She wove a tale of diplomatic necessity, her words keeping the workers at bay while Lewis completed his task. With a hiss of equalizing pressure, the airlock stabilized. Louis let out a breath of relief, gesturing for Arya to join him. They slipped through the airlock just as the maintenance crew rounded the corner. Their shouts of surprise cut off as the door sealed behind them. The section beyond the airlock led them to a secluded area of the station's arboretum. Lush vegetation surrounded them, a stark contrast to the sterile tunnels they had navigated. Exhausted and flushed with adrenaline, they took a moment to catch their breath. In the dim light filtering through the foliage, Louis found himself drawn to Arya. Their eyes met, and without a word, they came together in a passionate embrace. As their lips met, the artifact in Arya's pouch pulsed, emitting a soft energy that seemed to heighten their connection. Their moment of intimacy was abruptly interrupted by the chime of Arya's communication device. Prince Kael's voice filled the air, demanding to know her whereabouts. As Arya skillfully deflected Kael's questions, Louis's mind raced, formulating a plan. They needed to expose the conspiracy quickly, before their actions were discovered by both allies and enemies. Overhearing a conversation between passing officers, they learned of Captain Reyes's station-wide lockdown. Louis's eyes met Arya's, a spark of inspiration between them. "We can use this to our advantage," he said quietly. "Plant evidence, create a trail using the artifact's energy signature. Lead security right to Vayne and Zorn." Arya nodded, her expression determined. But as she moved to follow Louis, she stumbled, her eyes wide with surprise. "Louis," she whispered, her voice filled with wonder and a hint of fear. "Something's happening. The artifact. I can feel it changing me." Louis watched in amazement as Arya's muscles tensed, her movements becoming more fluid and powerful. Her eyes seemed to glow faintly, scanning the area with newfound acuity. "Enhanced abilities," Louis murmured, his mind racing to adjust their plan. "This changes things." As they prepared to enact their strategy, Louis couldn't help but wonder about the true nature of the artifact and its effects on Arya. With time running out and the station in chaos, they would have to unravel these mysteries on the fly. Arya flexed her hand, marveling at her increased strength. "Whatever this artifact is doing, we can use it to our advantage." Louis nodded, his expression grim yet determined. "Let's move. We've got a conspiracy to expose and a station to save." Together they slipped out of the Arboretum, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them in the corridors of Centauri Prime. Their steps quick and purposeful. The station's alarms continued to blare, providing cover for their movements through the bustling corridors. As they navigated the chaos, Louis noticed Arya's newfound grace and agility. Her movements were fluid, almost predatory, as she effortlessly dodged personnel rushing to their stations. "We need to move fast," Louis whispered, guiding Arya towards a less crowded section of the station. "Let's start planting the evidence." Arya nodded, her eyes scanning their surroundings with heightened awareness. "I can hear security teams 2 levels down," she murmured, her voice tinged with surprise at her enhanced senses. Louis raised an eyebrow, but quickly refocused on the task at hand. He pulled out a small device from his pocket, using it to mask their movements from the station's security cameras. They moved swiftly through maintenance corridors and rarely used passages, strategically placing fabricated evidence that would implicate Vayne and Zorn. As they worked, Arya's abilities continued to evolve. At one point, she effortlessly pried open a sealed compartment with her bare hands, her strength far exceeding what should have been possible for her slender frame. "Lewis," she said, her voice a mix of wonder and concern. "Something's happening to me. I can feel the artifact, changing me." He turned to look at her and noticed a faint, pulsating glow emanating from her skin. The rhythm matched the soft hum of the artifact in her pouch. "We need to finish this quickly," he said, his voice tight with urgency. As they planted the final pieces of evidence, Louis intercepted a coded transmission on his comm device. His eyes widened as he decrypted the message. "Vane and Zorn are planning to steal a ship. They're heading to the docking bay now." Arya's eyes flashed with commitment. "We can't let them escape. Everything we've done will be for nothing." They raced towards the docking area, Arya's enhanced speed allowing them to outpace the security checkpoints. As they approached the bay, they heard the sound of raised voices and the whine of a ship's engines powering up. Louis and Arya burst into the docking bay just as Vane and Zorn were preparing to board a small transport vessel. Without hesitation, Louis launched himself at Vane, tackling the man to the ground. They grappled fiercely, each trying to gain the upper hand. Arya faced off against Zorn, her newfound abilities giving her a distinct advantage. As Zorn lunged at her with a vibroblade, Arya moved with impossible speed, dodging the attack and countering with a swift kick that sent Zorn stumbling backward. The fight intensified, with Louis and Vane trading blows, while Arya and Zorn circled each other warily. Suddenly, the artifact in Arya's pouch pulsed with energy. A wave of power surged through her body, and before she could react, a burst of energy exploded from her hands, striking Zorn squarely in the chest. The man crumpled to the ground, unconscious. The display of power shocked everyone present, including Louis, who momentarily lost focus. Vane seized the opportunity, breaking free from Louis's grasp and making a dash for the ship. Louis scrambled to his feet, giving chase as Vane disappeared into the transport vessel. "Arya!" Louis called out, torn between pursuing Vane and ensuring her safety. Arya hesitated for a split second, her gaze darting between Louis and the approaching security team. Making her decision, she sprinted towards the ship, her enhanced speed allowing her to cross the distance in mere moments. As Louis and Arya entered the ship, the doors sealed behind them with a hiss. The vessel shuddered as Vane initiated the launch sequence, detaching from the station and moving away from Centauri Prime. Inside the cramped confines of the ship, Louis and Arya found themselves face-to-face with Vane, who had taken control of the pilot's seat. The man's face was a mask of desperation and rage as he manipulated the controls, accelerating the ship away from the station. "Stay back," Vane snarled, brandishing a small energy pistol. "I'll shoot if you come any closer." Louis raised his hand slowly, his mind racing to find a way out of their predicament. Beside him, Arya's skin continued to shimmer with an otherworldly glow, the artifact's energy pulsing through her body. As the ship hurtled through space, leaving Centauri Prime behind, Louis realized that their carefully laid plans had taken an unexpected turn. They were now trapped in a small vessel with a dangerous conspirator, the fate of human-Senkethi relations hanging in the balance. Arya's voice was low and tense as she spoke. "Louis, the artifact, its influence is growing stronger. I don't know how much longer I can control it." Louis met her gaze, seeing the mixture of fear and exhilaration in her eyes. Despite the danger of their situation, he couldn't help but feel a surge of attraction towards her. The close quarters of the ship only intensified the connection between them. As Vane piloted the ship deeper into space, Louis knew they needed to act quickly. They had to regain control of the vessel, neutralize Vane, and find a way back to Centauri Prime with the evidence they had gathered, all while grappling with the mysterious and potentially dangerous effects of the Senkethi artifact. The stars streaked by outside the ship's viewports, a reminder of the vast unknown that lay ahead. Whatever challenges awaited them, Louis and Arya would face them together, their bond growing stronger with each passing moment. Whatever challenges awaited them, Louis and Arya would face them together, their bond growing stronger with each passing second. The stolen transport vessel hummed as it cut through the void of space, leaving Centauri Prime behind. Inside, the air was thick with tension, as Louis, Arya, and their unwilling passenger, Marcus Vane, found themselves locked in a precarious standoff. Louis's eyes darted between Vane, who still clutched the energy pistol, and Arya, whose skin now emitted a soft, pulsating glow. The cramped confines of the ship forced them into uncomfortably close proximity, every movement amplified in the tight space. "Vane," Louis said, his voice low and steady, "you're out of options. Put down the weapon." Vane's hand trembled, his squeezing hard around the pistol's grip. His gaze flicked between Louis and Arya, desperation etched across his features. "You don't understand," he hissed. "If I go back, they'll—" Before he could finish, Arya moved with preternatural speed. In a blur of motion, she closed the distance between them, her hand clamping down on Vane's wrist. The conspirator cried out in pain and surprise as the pistol clattered to the floor. Louis wasted no time. He lunged forward, scooping up the fallen weapon and training it on Vane. "Arya, are you all right?" She nodded, her eyes wide with surprise at her own actions. I didn't even think. My body just reacted." With Vane subdued, Louis quickly fashioned makeshift restraints from equipment straps found in a nearby storage compartment. He secured the conspirator in the ship's tiny cargo hold, ensuring he was bound tightly but not inhumanely. "That should hold him," Louis muttered as he returned to the main cabin. He found Arya examining her hands, a look of wonder and trepidation on her face. "Louis," she whispered, "I can feel it growing stronger. The artifact, it's changing me in ways I don't understand." He approached her cautiously, noticing how her skin seemed to shimmer in the dim light of the cabin. "We'll figure this out together," he assured her, placing a hand on her shoulder. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through them both, the sexual tension between them intensifying in the close quarters. Shaking off the distraction, Louis turned his attention to the ship's controls. His military training kicked in as he quickly familiarized himself with the unfamiliar systems, plotting a course back to Centauri Prime. As Louis worked, Arya paced the small cabin, her movements unnaturally fluid and graceful. Suddenly, she gasped, her hand flying to her temple. "Arya, what is it?" Louis asked, concern evident in his voice. She blinked rapidly, her eyes unfocused. I can sense things. The ship, the systems, even the space around us. It's like I can feel the energy flowing through everything." Before Louis could respond, a warning klaxon blared through the cabin. He turned back to the console, his fingers flying over the controls. "We've got company," he announced grimly. "Long-range sensors are picking up a pursuing vessel." Arya moved to his side, her enhanced senses allowing her to interpret the readouts with startling speed. "It's a Tsenkethi warship," she said, her voice tight. "Prince Kyle must have sent them after us." Louis's expression resolute as the realization hit him. They were now fugitives from both human and Tsenkethi authorities, their situation even more precarious than before. "We can't outrun them in this transport," he muttered, scanning the star charts. His eyes lit up as he spotted a possible escape route. "But maybe we can outmaneuver them." With a sharp turn of the controls, Louis steered the ship towards a nearby asteroid field. The sudden change in direction sent Arya stumbling, her body colliding with his. For a moment they froze, acutely aware of each other's proximity in the cramped cockpit. Arya steadied herself, her hand lingering on Louis's arm. "What's the plan?" "We're going to use that asteroid field to lose our pursuers," he explained, his voice husky. "It's risky, but it's our best shot." As they approached the field, Louis's hands tightened on the controls. "This is going to get rough," he warned. "I need you to be my eyes. Your enhanced senses might be the edge we need to make it through." Arya nodded, closing her eyes to focus. As Louis piloted the ship into the treacherous maze of space debris, Arya called out warnings and directions, her newfound abilities allowing her to perceive threats before they appeared on sensors. The ship bucked and shuddered as Louis executed a series of daring maneuvers, narrowly avoiding collisions with massive asteroids. In the cargo hold, they could hear Vane's muffled shouts as he was jostled about. As they delved deeper into the asteroid field, the Tsenkethi artifact in Arya's pouch began to pulse with increased intensity. Energy fluctuations rippled through the ship's systems, causing consoles to spark and flicker. "The artifact!" Arya cried out, her body rigid with concentration. "Its energy is becoming unstable. I think I can stabilize it, but I don't know what will happen." Lewis spared her a glance, noting the drive in her eyes. "Do what you have to do. I trust you." Arya reached into the pouch, her fingers wrapping around the pulsating orb. As she focused her will on the artifact, her eyes began to glow with an otherworldly light. Visions flashed through her mind, glimpses of ancient Zenkethi history, fragments of long-forgotten knowledge. The ship lurched violently, snapping Arya out of her trance. A proximity alarm screeched as a massive asteroid loomed directly in their path. "Lewis!" Arya shouted, but it was too late. The transport clipped the edge of the asteroid, sending them into a wild spin. The impact tore a hole in the hull, alarms blaring as atmosphere began to vent into space. "Hull breach in the cargo hold!" Lewis yelled over the cacophony of warnings. He looked at Arya, conflict evident in his eyes. "I have to check on Vane. Can you pilot the ship?" Arya nodded, sliding into the pilot's seat as Lewis rushed towards the cargo hold. As she grappled with the unfamiliar controls, using her enhanced abilities to steady the ship, she could hear the sounds of struggle from behind her. Moments later, Louis returned, supporting a battered and semi-conscious Vane. "The cargo hold is compromised," he reported grimly. "We need to seal it off and find a way to repair the breach." As they retreated to the ship's only intact compartment, the small sleeping quarters, Arya couldn't help but notice the way Lewis's muscles strained under Vane's weight. The close proximity of their bodies in the tiny space sent a surge of heat through her, the artifact's influence amplifying her every sensation. With Vane secured, Louis turned to Arya, his expression a mix of tenacity and uncertainty. "We're not out of this yet," he said, his voice low. "But whatever comes next, we face it together." Arya met his gaze, feeling the pull of their connection despite the danger surrounding them. As the ship drifted deeper into the asteroid field, its systems failing and a Tzenkethi warship in pursuit, they knew their challenges were not nearly finished. The true nature of the artifact, the extent of the conspiracy, and the fate of their mission all hung in the balance as they hurtled through the void, their destinies now irrevocably intertwined. Intertwined as they faced an uncertain future. Louis's eyes darted across the ship's control panel, searching for any solution to their predicament. Suddenly, an idea struck him. "The artifact," he breathed, turning to Arya. "We might be able to use its energy to boost our propulsion systems." Arya's eyes widened, a mix of excitement and apprehension crossing her features. "It's risky, but it might be our only chance," she agreed, reaching for the pulsating object in her pouch. As her fingers wrapped around the Tzenkethi relic, a surge of energy coursed through her body. She gasped, the sensation both exhilarating and terrifying. With trembling hands, she connected the artifact to the ship's power matrix. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The vessel shuddered, enveloped in a brilliant, iridescent glow. Lewis gripped the controls tightly as the ship lurched forward with unprecedented speed, quickly leaving the pursuing Tzenkethi warship in its wake. The sudden acceleration threw Lewis off balance. He stumbled, colliding with Arya in the cramped cockpit. Their bodies pressed together, the physical contact sending a jolt of electricity through them both. The artifact's energy seemed to amplify their mutual attraction, making it increasingly difficult to focus on the task at hand. As they hurtled through space at impossible speeds, Arya's transformed physiology began to react to the artifact's power in unexpected ways. Her body emitted pulses of energy that synchronized with the ship's new propulsion rhythm, creating a symbiosis between her, the artifact, and the vessel. "Lewis!" Arya gasped, her voice strained. "I can feel the ship. It's like we're connected somehow." Lewis struggled to maintain his composure, acutely aware of Arya's body pressed against his. "Can you control it?" he asked, his voice husky with a mixture of concern and desire. Before Arya could respond, a series of alarms blared through the cabin. Warning lights flashed across the console, indicating critical stress on the hull integrity. "We're going too fast," Lewis shouted over the cacophony of alerts. "The ship can't take much more of this." Making a split-second decision, Lewis initiated a controlled deceleration. The process proved challenging as the artifact's energy interfered with the ship's normal functions. Arya, drawing on her growing connection to the artifact, placed her hands over Lewis's on the controls. "Together," she said, her eyes meeting his. They worked in tandem, their movements synchronized as they guided the ship back to more manageable speeds. As the vessel slowed, Lewis and Arya found themselves in an uncharted region of space. The navigational systems, scrambled by the artifact's energy, failed to provide any recognizable reference points. "We're lost," Louis muttered, scanning the unfamiliar star patterns on the display. Arya nodded grimly, her enhanced senses reaching out into the void. "Wait," she said suddenly, pointing to a small blue-green orb in the distance. "There's a planetoid nearby. It seems habitable." With their fuel reserves depleted and life support systems strained, Lewis made the decision to land on the mysterious world. As they began their descent, the artifact flared again, interfering with the landing systems. The ship bucked and shuddered as it entered the planetoid's atmosphere. Lewis wrestled with the controls, his muscles straining with the effort. Arya clung to him, her body molding against his as she used her enhanced abilities to help guide their descent. They hit the surface hard, the impact rattling through the ship's frame. As the dust settled, Lewis and Arya found themselves tangled together in the cockpit, their faces mere inches apart. For a moment they remained frozen, caught in each other's gaze. The spell was broken by a groan from the sleeping quarters. "Vane," Louis said, reluctantly pulling away from Arya. "We should check on him." They found Marcus Vane still restrained, but conscious, his eyes wild and unfocused. "The circles within circles," he muttered feverishly. "The conspiracy. It goes deeper than we ever imagined." Louis and Arya exchanged worried glances. Whatever visions the artifact had given Vane during their journey, they seemed to have shaken him to his core. With Vane secured, Louis and Arya made their way to the ship's airlock. As the door hissed open, they stepped out onto the alien landscape, their feet sinking slightly into the soft purple soil. The air was thin but breathable, filled with unfamiliar scents. Strange, bioluminescent plants dotted the landscape, casting an ethereal glow across the terrain. In the distance, crystal-like formations jutted from the ground, reflecting the light of an unfamiliar sun. As they surveyed their surroundings, the artifact in Arya's pouch pulsed with renewed energy. She gasped, her hand flying to the pouch. "Louis," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. I think this place is connected to the artifact somehow." Louis nodded, his expression grim. "Then we need to find out why," he said, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Whatever secrets this planet holds, they might be our only way home, and our best chance at unraveling this conspiracy once and for all." With a shared look of dedication, Louis and Arya set out to explore the alien world, the artifact's energy humming between them. As they walked side by side into the unknown, the fate of their mission, and perhaps the future of human-Senketi relations, rested on their ability to unlock the mysteries of this uncharted planetoid and find a way back to known space. Louis and Arya took their first steps onto the alien world, their feet sinking slightly into the soft purple soil. The air was thin but breathable, filled with unfamiliar scents that tickled their nostrils. Strange, bioluminescent plants dotted the landscape, casting an ethereal glow across the terrain. In the distance, crystal-like formations jutted from the ground, reflecting the light of an unfamiliar sun. As they surveyed their surroundings, the artifact in Arya's pouch pulsed with renewed energy. She gasped, her hand flying to the pouch. "Lewis," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and trepidation. I think this place is connected to the artifact somehow." Lewis nodded, his expression grim. "Then we need to find out why," he said, his eyes scanning the horizon. "Whatever secrets this planet holds, they might be our only way home, and our best chance at unraveling this conspiracy once and for all." With a shared look of dedication, they set out to explore the alien world, the artifact's energy humming between them. As they walked side by side into the unknown, the fate of their mission, and perhaps the future of human-Senketi relations, rested on their ability to unlock the mysteries of this uncharted planetoid and find a way back to known space. Louis's military training kicked in as they ventured further from the ship. His eyes darted from one alien plant to another, assessing their potential as food sources. "These look edible," he muttered, crouching to examine a cluster of iridescent fungi. "We'll need to run some tests, but they might help replenish our supplies." Arya nodded, her enhanced sense stretching out across the landscape. She closed her eyes, concentrating on the faint vibrations beneath her feet. "There's water," she said suddenly, pointing to a rocky outcropping. "Underground, I can feel it flowing." As they made their way towards the potential water source, a glint in the distance caught Louis's eye. He squinted, trying to make out the shape through the hazy atmosphere. "Arya, do you see that?" She followed his gaze, her enhanced vision piercing through the mist. "It looks like ruins? Some kind of structure." The artifact in Arya's pouch began to pulse more intensely as they approached the ancient building. Its architecture was unlike anything they had ever seen, fluid lines and impossible angles that seemed to defy the laws of physics. The entire structure appeared to be made of a single, seamless material that shimmered with an inner light. "This has to be connected to the artifact," Arya said, her voice hushed with awe. She felt an inexplicable pull towards the ruins, as if the artifact itself was guiding her. "We need to go inside." Louis hesitated, his instincts warning him of potential danger. But as he looked at Arya, seeing the grit in her eyes, he knew they had no choice. "All right," he said, drawing his weapon. "But we stay together, no wandering off." They entered the ruins through a gap in what appeared to be the main entrance. The interior was a maze of corridors and chambers, all pulsing with the same faint light as the exterior. As they moved deeper into the structure, Louis noticed similarities between some of the devices they encountered and the hacking tool they had discovered on Centauri Prime. "This technology," he murmured, running his hand along a console covered in unfamiliar symbols. "It's like nothing I've ever seen, but there's something familiar about it." Arya nodded, her eyes wide as she took in their surroundings. "It's all connected somehow. The artifact, this place, the conspiracy, it's all part of something bigger." Suddenly, the artifact flared with intense energy. Arya gasped, doubling over as a flood of images assaulted her mind. Louis rushed to her side, supporting her as she swayed on her feet. "What is it? What do you see?" he asked, his voice tight with concern. Arya's eyes were unfocused, seeing something beyond their current reality. "A civilization," she whispered. "Ancient and powerful. They were the ancestors of both humans and Zenkethi. We're related, Louis. Our species, we come from the same source." Before Louis could process this earth-shattering revelation, a low hum filled the air. The symbols on the walls and consoles began to glow brighter, and suddenly, holographic figures materialized around them. These guardians, remnants of the ancient security system, raised weapons of pure energy. Louis reacted instantly, pushing Arya behind a console as energy blasts scorched the air where they had been standing. He returned fire, but his shots passed harmlessly through the holographic entities. "Arya!" he shouted over the din of battle. "Can you use the artifact? Maybe it can disable them." Arya nodded, closing her eyes and focusing on the pulsing energy in her pouch. As she connected with the artifact's power, her body began to glow with the same ethereal light as their surroundings. She raised her hand, and a wave of energy burst forth, disrupting the holographic guardians. Working in tandem, Louis and Arya fought their way through the ruins. His combat skills and quick thinking complemented her newfound abilities perfectly. They moved as one, covering each other's blind spots and anticipating each other's movements with an almost supernatural synchronicity. As they progressed deeper into the heart of the ruins, the challenges became more intense. The security systems grew more complex, forcing them to solve puzzles and overcome obstacles that tested both their physical and mental abilities. With each trial, the connection between Louis and Arya deepened. Their bodies often pressed close together as they maneuvered through tight spaces or supported each other over treacherous gaps. Finally, they reached what appeared to be a central chamber. In the middle of the room stood a device that looked like a larger, more elaborate version of the artifact they carried. It pulsed with power, sending waves of energy rippling through the air. Arya felt an irresistible pull towards the device. "Lewis," she whispered, her voice trembling, I think this is what we've been looking for." As she approached the central artifact, her body began to glow more intensely. The transformation that had begun when she first touched the smaller artifact accelerated, her form becoming almost translucent as she merged with the energy field surrounding the device. "Arya, wait!" Louis called out, reaching for her. But as his fingers brushed her arm, a surge of energy repelled him, sending him stumbling backward. He watched, helpless, as Arya's consciousness seemed to merge with the ancient technology. Her eyes glowed with an inner light, and her expression was one of wonder and profound understanding. "I can see it all, Lewis," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the chamber. "The history of our species, the true purpose of the artifacts, it's all here." Before she could elaborate, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ruins, and the walls around them started to crack and crumble. "Arya, we have to go," Lewis shouted, fighting his way through the intensifying energy field. With a mighty effort, he managed to grab her arm and pull her away from the central artifact. As Arya's connection to the device was severed, she collapsed into Louis's arms. He scooped her up, cradling her against his chest as he ran towards the exit. The ruins were collapsing around them, great chunks of the ceiling crashing to the floor as the planet itself seemed to be tearing apart. They emerged from the ruins to find the landscape in chaos. The ground split and shifted beneath their feet, forcing Lewis to make split-second decisions as he navigated the treacherous terrain. Arya, still dazed from her experience with the artifact, clung to him tightly. As they approached their ship, Louis's heart sank. The main hatch was open, and he could hear the engines powering up. "Vane!" he growled, realizing their prisoner must have escaped and was attempting to steal the vessel. With a burst of speed, Louis carried Arya up the boarding ramp just as it began to close. They tumbled into the cargo hold, the impact jarring Arya back to full consciousness. "We have to stop him," she gasped, struggling to her feet. Together they rushed to the cockpit, finding Vane at the controls. A brief but intense struggle ensued, with Louis and Arya working in perfect synchronization to subdue their opponent once more. But the fight had cost them precious time. The planetoid was breaking apart around them, massive fissures opening in the ground and spewing superheated gases into the atmosphere. Louis took the pilot's seat, his hands dancing over the controls as he initiated the launch sequence. "The systems are still damaged," he said through gritted teeth. "We might not have enough power to break orbit." Arya placed her hand on the artifact, which was now pulsing in time with her heartbeat. "We will," she said with quiet certainty. As Lewis engaged the engines, Arya channeled the artifact's energy into the ship's power systems. The vessel shuddered and groaned as it lifted off, fighting against the planetoid's gravitational pull. Louis's muscles strained as he wrestled with the controls, guiding them through a hail of debris and atmospheric disturbances. With a final, titanic effort, they broke free of the dying world's grip. The planetoid exploded behind them, the shock wave catching the ship and sending it tumbling end over end into the depths of space. As the ship's systems stabilized and the immediate danger passed, Louis and Arya found themselves alone in the cockpit, their bodies pressed close in the confined space. The adrenaline of their narrow escape, combined with the intensity of their shared experiences, created an electric tension between them. Their eyes met, and without a word, they came together in a passionate kiss. The artifact's energy seemed to flow through them both, amplifying every sensation as their bodies entwined. The moment was broken by a series of urgent alerts from the ship's computer. As they reluctantly separated, Louis noticed that the console was displaying a massive influx of data. The files Vane had discovered were decrypting themselves, promising to reveal the full extent of the conspiracy that had brought them to this point. But before they could examine the files, another alarm sounded. The long-range sensors had detected multiple ships converging on their location. Some were clearly Tsenkethi in origin, others appeared to be human vessels, and still others were of completely unknown design. Louis and Arya shared a look of tenacity. Their journey, it seemed, was just the beginning. With a conspiracy to unravel, pursuing forces to evade, and the profound implications of their discoveries to contend with, they faced an uncertain future. But as their hands intertwined over the ship's controls, They knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Together, they would face them head on. The ship's computer chimed urgently, pulling their attention back to the immediate crisis. Warning lights flashed across the control panel as multiple systems began to fail simultaneously. "Hull integrity compromised," the computer's voice announced, its usual calm tone tinged with synthetic urgency. "Life support systems failing. Estimated time to complete system failure, 15 minutes. Louis's hands flew over the controls, his military training kicking in as he initiated emergency protocols. "We're venting atmosphere in sections 3 through 7, he reported, his voice tight with concentration. "I'm sealing off those areas now." Arya closed her eyes, focusing on the energy still coursing through her body from the ancient device. She placed her hands on the ship's console, and a soft glow emanated from her fingertips. The failing systems stabilized momentarily, their power levels rising. "I can keep us going for a while," she said, her voice strained, "but I don't know how long I can maintain this." As Arya channeled her energy into the ship, her physical form began to shimmer. Her Tzenkethi features became more fluid, adapting to the flow of power coursing through her. Louis glanced at her, a mixture of awe and concern in his eyes. "Arya, your body—" "I know," she cut him off, her eyes still closed in concentration. "I can feel it changing, but we don't have time to worry about that now." A series of rapid beeps from the navigation console drew their attention. Louis's eyes widened as he read the display. Multiple ships converging on our location. Some Tzenkethi, some human, and others I can't identify. Before they could process this new threat, the computer chimed again. "Decryption complete. Files unlocked." Louis and Arya shared a look of anticipation and dread. The files Vane had discovered were now accessible, promising to reveal the full extent of the conspiracy that had set them on this path. As Louis began to scan through the decrypted data, his expression hardened. "This goes deeper than we thought," he muttered, his voice imbued with disbelief. "High-ranking officials in both human and Tzenkethi governments. They've been manipulating us, pushing both sides towards war." Arya leaned in, her eyes skimming the information. "They're after the precursor technology, the artifacts, the ruins. They want to use the war as cover to seize control of it all." Their contemplation was interrupted by an incoming transmission. The ship's computer announced, "Signal detected. Origin, ISS Horizon. Classification, human exploration vessel." Louis's brow furrowed. "The Horizon? That's Admiral Blackwood's ship. What's he doing out here?" He hesitated for a moment before accepting the transmission. A gruff, authoritative voice filled the cockpit. "Unidentified vessel. This is Admiral James Blackwood of the ISS Horizon. We've detected your distress signal. What is your situation?" Louis exchanged a glance with Arya before responding. "Admiral Blackwood, this is Lieutenant Louis Chen. We've suffered severe damage and multiple system failures. We're in need of immediate assistance." There was a pause before Blackwood replied. "Lieutenant Chen, your ship doesn't match any known registry. What's your mission out here?" Louis took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. "Sir, our mission is classified. We've uncovered information vital to both human and Tzenkethi security. We need to speak with you urgently, but not over an open channel." Another pause, longer this time. Finally, Blackwood spoke again. "Understood, Lieutenant. I'm transmitting coordinates for a rendezvous at Nexus Point. It's a neutral trading hub in unclaimed space. We can meet there safely and assess your situation." Louis looked to Arya, who nodded her agreement. "Acknowledged, Admiral. We'll see you at Nexus Point." As the transmission ended, Louis plotted a course for the coordinates Blackwood had sent. The damaged ship groaned in protest as he pushed its engines to their limit. "Can you keep us together until we reach the station?" he asked Arya, noting the strain evident on her face as she continued to channel energy into the ship's systems. She nodded, her heart made. "I'll get us there. Just focus on flying." As they raced towards Nexus Point, Louis and Arya worked in perfect synchronization. Their bodies often pressed close in the confines of the cockpit as they moved from one system to another, making repairs and adjustments to keep the ship functional. The constant proximity, combined with the lingering effects of the artifact and the intensity of their shared experiences, created a palpable tension between them. More than once their eyes met, and they found themselves on the verge of giving in to their mutual attraction. But the urgency of their mission always pulled them back to the task at hand. As they approached Nexus Point, the ship's sensors detected a flurry of activity around the station. Louis's hands tightened on the controls as he maneuvered through the busy space lanes. Multiple vessels detected, the computer announced. Identifying ISS Horizon confirmed. Tzenkethi warships present. Additional vessels of unknown configuration detected. Louis guided their battered ship towards one of Nexus Point's docking bays, narrowly avoiding a collision with a departing freighter. As the docking clamps engaged, he and Arya shared a look of relief and apprehension. "We made it," Arya said, her voice weary as she finally released her connection to the ship's systems. Her form shimmered once more before settling back into a more recognizable Tzenkethi appearance. Louis nodded, his expression grim. "Yeah, but now comes the hard part. We're going to have to be very careful about who we trust here." As if in response to his words, the ship's external cameras showed a security team approaching their docking bay. At their head was a stern-looking woman with visible cybernetic enhancements. "Attention, unidentified vessel," a voice crackled over the ship's comm system. "This is Commander Elena Reyes, Chief of Security for Nexus Point. Your ship has been flagged for inspection due to its damaged state. Prepare to disembark immediately." Louis and Arya exchanged a worried glance. They had arrived at Nexus Point, but their challenges were a long way to go. As they prepared to face whatever awaited them on the station, the artifact pulsed in Arya's possession, a reminder of the power and the responsibility they now carried. As the docking clamps engaged with a resounding thud, Louis and Arya shared a final glance of understanding before rising from their seats. The artifact pulsed once more in Arya's possession as they approached the airlock. Louis placed a hand on the door controls, hesitating for a moment. "Remember," he said in a low voice, "we don't know who we can trust here. Stay alert." Arya nodded, her features settling into a determined expression. As the airlock cycled open, they were met by the stern gaze of Commander Elena Reyes and her security team. "Welcome to Nexus Point," Reyes said, her cybernetic eyes scanning them both. "I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to surrender any weapons and follow me to the security office." Louis and Arya complied, knowing they had little choice. As they were escorted through the bustling corridors of the station, Louis took in their surroundings, noting potential escape routes and defensive positions out of habit. The security office was a hive of activity, with human and Tzenkethi officials engaged in heated discussions. As they entered, Louis immediately recognized the imposing figure of Admiral Blackwood, his weathered face creased with concern. Prince Kael, the Tzenkethi diplomat, turned to face the newcomers. His eyes widened as they fell on Arya, recognition flashing across his features. "Arya," he exclaimed, his voice a mixture of shock and accusation. "What is the meaning of this?" The room erupted into chaos. Human officials shouted accusations of Tzenkethi deception, while the Tzenkethi delegation demanded explanations for Arya's presence. Louis, seeing the situation spiraling out of control, stepped forward. "Everyone, please," he shouted, his voice cutting through the din. "There's more at stake here than you realize. We've uncovered evidence of a conspiracy that threatens both our species." As Louis began to explain, carefully selecting which pieces of information to reveal, Arya felt the artifact growing warm against her skin. She placed a hand over it, trying to suppress its energy, but it was too late. A pulse of brilliant energy erupted from the artifact, washing over the room in a wave of light. Every electronic device in the vicinity sparked and went dark, plunging the office into momentary darkness. In the silence that followed, Arya gasped as she felt a surge of power course through her body. Unable to control the newfound ability, she projected a series of holographic images into the air around them. The security office disappeared, replaced by vivid scenes of ancient ruins and impossibly advanced technology. The assembled officials watched in awe as images of the precursor race's achievements played out before their eyes. As the display faded, leaving the room in stunned silence, Admiral Blackwood was the first to recover. He approached Luis and Arya, his voice low and urgent. Whatever you've found, it's clear its value is immeasurable. I can offer you protection, resources, whatever you need. But we need access to that artifact and its knowledge. Before Louis could respond, Prince Kale stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with interest. The Tsenkethi Imperium would provide far better support for your research. Our scientists are unparalleled in their understanding of precursor technology. Louis glanced at Arya, uncertain how to proceed, when Commander Reyes's voice cut through the tension. I hate to interrupt this negotiation, but we have a more pressing concern. All eyes turned to the security chief as she accessed a holographic display with her cybernetic interface. A fleet of unmarked ships has just entered the sector. They're on an intercept course with Nexus Point. Louis's heart raced as he recognized the energy signatures displayed on the screen. Those are the same ships we encountered earlier. They're part of the conspiracy. Admiral Blackwood's expression hardened. It seems we have a common enemy. Prince Kale, I propose a temporary alliance to defend Nexus Point and protect this artifact. The Tsenkethi prince nodded gravely. Agreed. We cannot allow this technology to fall into the wrong hands. As the two leaders began coordinating their forces, Commander Reyes turned to Louis. Lieutenant, your combat experience could be invaluable. I need you to help coordinate our defense. Louis nodded, falling easily into his military role. Understood. We'll need to fortify our defenses and prepare for both space and ground assault. As they moved to the command center, Arya suddenly stumbled, her body shimmering with energy. Louis caught her, concern etched on his face. Arya, what's happening? She looked up at him, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. I can feel the station's systems. It's like they're an extension of my own body. Commander Reyes studied Arya with a mixture of fascination and wariness. If you can interface with our systems, it could give us a significant advantage. As preparations for battle intensified, Louis found himself working closely with Arya and Commander Reyes. Arya's enhanced abilities proved invaluable, allowing her to coordinate communications and monitor the station's defenses with unprecedented efficiency. In a rare moment of calm, Louis pulled Arya aside, his hand lingering on her arm. Are you okay? This is all happening so fast. Arya met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of excitement and fear. I'm scared, Louis, but I also feel more alive than I ever have before. Their faces drew closer, the tension between them finally reaching a breaking point. As their lips met in a passionate kiss, the station shuddered violently, alarms blaring throughout the complex. They broke apart, the moment shattered by the reality of their situation. Louis squeezed Arya's hand once before sprinting towards the command center. Stay safe, he called over his shoulder. As Louis took his position, coordinating the defense forces, Arya connected herself to the station's systems. Through her enhanced senses, she could feel the approaching enemy fleet, their weapons charging as they prepared to attack. The first volley of energy weapons struck Nexus Point's shields, the impact reverberating through the station's superstructure. Louis's voice rang out clear and confident, directing fighters and coordinating with the human and Tsenkethi ships that now fought side by side against the common threat. As the battle raged, Commander Reyes approached Louis and Arya, her expression grim. I've uncovered something you need to see, she said, her cybernetic eye flashing as she transferred data to a secure terminal. Louis's eyes widened as he scanned the information. This links high-ranking officials on both sides to the conspiracy. If this gets out, a massive explosion rocked the station, cutting off their conversation. Arya cried out in pain, her connection to the station's systems overwhelmed by the damage. The artifact, she gasped, clutching her head. Its energy signature is becoming unstable. The weapons fire is causing some kind of resonance effect. Louis looked from Arya to the battle raging outside, then back to the damning evidence on the screen before him. In that moment, he knew they had to take drastic action if they hoped to survive this encounter and expose the truth. Commander Reyes, he said, his voice filled with drive, I have a plan, but it's going to require us to take one hell of a risk. Risk. But if it works, we might just save everyone on this station and expose the truth. Commander Reyes nodded, her cybernetic eye flashing as she processed the information. What do you need from me? Full access to the station's defensive systems, Lewis replied, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. And I need Arya to interface with the artifact in the main deflector array. Arya's eyes widened. Lewis, that's incredibly dangerous. The energy levels involved could... I know, he cut her off, taking her hand. But it's our best shot. I'll be right there with you. As Lewis outlined his plan, the battle outside intensified. The station rocked with each impact, shields straining against the onslaught. Through the viewports, they could see the dazzling display of weapons fire as human and Senkethi ships engaged the conspirators' fleet. Commander Reyes quickly granted Louis the access he needed, her fingers flying over the control panel. You have full control of our defensive grid. Make it count. Lewis nodded, immediately immersing himself in the tactical data. His eyes darted from screen to screen, taking in the positions of friendly and enemy ships. With practiced ease, he began issuing orders, his voice clear and confident over the comm system. Senkethi cruiser Vorakesh, form up with the ISS Intrepid. I want you to execute a pincer movement on the enemy's port flank. Human fighters, provide cover fire. As Lewis coordinated the defense, Arya prepared herself to interface with the artifact and the station's systems. She closed her eyes, focusing on the energy pulsing within her. The artifact grew warm against her skin, its glow intensifying. I'm ready, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Louis glanced at her, concern etched on his face. Remember, if it gets too much, disengage immediately. We'll find another way. Arya nodded, then placed her hands on the control panel. The moment she made contact, energy surged through her body. She gasped, her back arching as the immense power of the artifact flowed into Nexus Point systems. Lewis watched in awe as Arya's body began to glow, pulsating with otherworldly energy. He could see the pain on her face as she struggled to control the interface. Without hesitation, he reached out and took her hand. The moment their skin touched, something extraordinary happened. The erratic energy flow stabilized, creating a harmonious connection between human, Senkethi, and the ancient technology. Arya's expression softened, her eyes meeting Lewis's with a mix of gratitude and wonder. Through their joined hands, Louis could feel the raw power coursing through Arya. It was unlike anything he had ever experienced, a perfect fusion of biology and technology, of past and present. The deflector array is coming online, Commander Reyes reported, her cybernetic eye flashing as she processed the data. Energy levels are off the charts. Lewis turned his attention back to the battle, his free hand dancing over the tactical controls. All Allied ships clear a path for the main deflector. We're about to fire. Outside, the station's massive deflector dish began to glow with an intense blue-white light. Energy arced across its surface, building to a crescendo. Then, with a burst of brilliance that momentarily outshone the nearby star, a beam of pure energy lanced out into space. The beam swept across the battlefield like a scythe through wheat. Enemy ships caught in its path suddenly went dark, their systems overloaded by the artifact's influence. Fighters tumbled out of control, and larger vessels listed helplessly in space. Simultaneously, every communication channel in the sector crackled to life. The evidence of the conspiracy, carefully compiled by Commander Reyes, began broadcasting to all vessels in range. Logs, communiques, and damning financial records laid bare the truth behind the conflict. On the bridge of the ISS Horizon, Admiral Blackwood's face paled as he received the transmission. Across the battlefield, Prince Kael's eyes widened in shock as he processed the information. Both leaders, realizing the extent of the deception, immediately began issuing orders to arrest the implicated officials in their delegations. The remaining enemy ships, their leadership thrown into disarray by the revelations, began to break formation. Some surrendered, powering down their weapons and signaling their capitulation. Others turned tail and fled, streaking away into the depths of space. As the tide of battle turned decisively in their favor, Louis felt the energy flowing through Arya begin to subside. The artifact's glow dimmed, its purpose apparently fulfilled. Gently, he helped Arya disengage from the interface, supporting her as she slumped against him. You did it, he murmured, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You saved us all. Arya looked up at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and elation. We did it, she corrected, her hand still intertwined with his. As the adrenaline of battle faded, Louis became acutely aware of their proximity. Arya's body was pressed against his, her warmth seeping through the fabric of his uniform. Their faces were mere inches apart, and for a moment, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. Slowly, almost hesitantly, Louis leaned in. Arya met him halfway, their lips coming together in a kiss that was both tender and passionate. It was a release of all the tension, fear, and unspoken feelings that had built up between them since their journey began. The moment was interrupted by Commander Reyes clearing her throat. I hate to break this up, she said, a hint of amusement in her voice, but we have a situation developing. Louis and Arya reluctantly separated, turning to face the security chief. Through the view screen, they could see a new group of ships dropping out of warp near the station. These weren't the sleek, predatory vessels of the conspirators, but rather the unmistakable silhouettes of diplomatic cruisers. It seems, Commander Reyes said, her cybernetic eye whirring as it processed the incoming data, that we're about to have some very important visitors. Louis and Arya exchanged a glance, knowing that their ordeal was just the beginning. The battle might have been won, but now they faced a new challenge, navigating the political fallout of their actions and shaping the future of human-Senkethi relations. As they watched the approaching ships, Louis squeezed Arya's hand. Whatever came next, they would face it together.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.